and climbing up this hillside towards what will be the start of a week-long journey through the mountains. And I'll tell you, this is the most magnificent viewpoint in the whole of Britain. And if you don't believe me, why don't you come with me and see for yourself? This is the wild and windy summit of Suilven, a remarkable mountain of Torridonian sandstone that rears up out of the loch and splattered moorlands of Inverpolly and Assynt in northwest Scotland. And up here between the heavens and the deep blue sea, I'm about to embark on a 70-mile journey through the mountains of Sutherland, an area that many have described as the empty lands. But I'm curious about that. The empty lands? Says who?
There's nothing empty about it. It's just packed with life and a vibrant nature. And how do you describe it? The mountains, the moorlands, the smell, the scent, the beaches, the wildflowers, eagles, buzzards, green shank. I don't know. There's something to see and do every minute of every day.
Bruce Sanderson is one of many people I've met over the last year who's chosen to make his home in Sutherland. He spent most of his life fishing Scotland's remote mountain lochs and wrote the popular trout fishing guide that's become an angler's Bible. Before starting on this 70-mile walk, I decided to ease myself into the exercise ahead. I've never actually fished these lochs, but I'm willing to try anything once.
I wrote a little poem, 4 lines, about fishing. For salmon, trout and sea trout, for all fish, great or small, let thanks be given a full recast to him that gied us all.
And we're off. Glad you volunteered to row.
The first part. Now, this is it, Cameron. Take no prisoners. Now, you do not need to cast a long line. Chuck it up in the air, aim for the sky. Oh, there you are, got that one.
You need this?
Okay, thank you. Come on.
Nice. Yay, well done. Excellent.
All right, we'll put him back.
So what was the defining moment when you said, you know, I'm now an angler?
I'm not really an angler yet. I keep trying, I keep trying. I'm sure that at the moment I said, oh, I'm an angler, I'd stop catching fish. Fishing has given me more pleasure than I can say for most of my life. I do know that giving a child a love of fishing is far more important than putting money in the bank for them. Money comes and goes, but a love of fishing stays with you to your dying day. Here's one.
Oh, look.
Lovely wee fish.
Lovely.
It's a very small fish, but it's a typical example of a Highland Loch wild brown trout. It's going back now.
Yeah.
There you go, Ian.
There we go.
And that's another thing about fishing, you see. It's hard to think about anything else. I've got loads of stuff to do, which I call work. Not just now, I don't think about it.
Yeah.
And that's the treasure, the joy of being out in Loch.
Well, how many did you get?
The boat caught about a dozen fish.
That was nice of him. I had caught, well, precisely none. But back to something I'm more familiar with. My own route, which I hope will eventually become known as the Sutherland Trail, started at Loch Inver, climbed Suilven, crossed the shoulder of Canisp to Inchnadamh, from where I climbed over wind-scoured hills and corries and down to Kyleskew. From there I crossed the hills of the Ray Estate to Achfarry and the start of the ascent of Foinaven. A high Bialach took me to Glenmore and Altnacaliach, from where the Moyne path finally led to the Kyle of Tongue and Journey's End on Benloyal. Suilven, or Suilven, the Pillar Mountain, doesn't reach the 3,000-foot elevation that would make it a Munro. It doesn't even make the 2,500-foot height that would give it Corbett status. But despite its lack of elevation, it's a remarkable mountain in every other respect. It's got bulk, it's got character, it's steep-sided, and it's very impressive.
It's quite a long walk out from Suilven to Elphin, but even in weather conditions like this, the surroundings are stunning.
This whole area is synonymous with land reform. The story of the Assynt crofters is a remarkable one and could be described as the beginning of a landowning revolution in Scotland. Highland crofters had always been at the mercy of the landowners, many of whom had removed their tenants from the fertile hinterland to coastal fringes during the infamous clearances. But more recently, Highland estates were bought and sold, often without the knowledge of their tenants. And in 1992, when the estate was once again up for sale, the Assynt crofters decided enough was enough. They began a campaign to raise the money to buy the estate themselves, and their success changed the course of history. John Mackenzie was involved from the very start, and the implications of their achievement are still difficult to grasp.
The realisation the following day of going out and just looking around, and the fact that we now own this, yes. It was just the transformation. When I look back on my grandfather, and the hard life that these people endured.
Yes, indeed.
And now we were masters of this.
That's wonderful.
He just would not have believed it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You really kind of overturned history, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
As I said, my view was that we should, that I would like to do something that would be of value to this community in perpetuity. Yeah. But frankly, the success that we've achieved is beyond belief. We now own the land. We have a democratically elected board who seek to bring input from each of the townships. But we largely see ourselves as facilitators. In other words, liberating the crofters of Assynt to do what they feel is appropriate to their own needs and aspirations, and that we will encourage and support them.
Nearly 2 decades later, and the crofts are flourishing, and the dream of a sustainable future is being fulfilled by young people like 16-year-old James Morrison. Born during the buyout negotiations, he's quite literally a child of land reform.
I'm so used to being so quiet up here. We keep ourselves to ourselves. I've friends dotted around the place up here. I've also travelled around a lot of places, but no matter how often I go away or how long I spend away, I always just want to get back to home. As they say, there's no place like home.
There you go.
That's it. I'll just do this quickly as soon as I've marked it.
I've been doing it ever since I was old enough to be down the Fank, so I've enjoyed it immensely. So if I go off to the city, what would I do? What would I do? I certainly couldn't stand working indoors, sitting in an office or that sort of thing. It's just not me. I like to be outdoors and active all the time.
Good. Well done.
That's it.
I can see you moving the spray because it's quite easy to miss one.
Oh, it is, yeah.
There's some people want crofts just to be left alone and let them go back to wild and a wilderness out there, but I don't want that. Why let the crofts go to waste? Keep them in action, do something useful with them, try and keep them going. They've been in our family for years and years, so try and keep them going. We'll lift it up in its end and then we'll roll it down. So we'll lift it up towards you there. That's it. My main aim in life is to stay up here and carry on working outdoors for as long as I can. And we'll just spin it round a bit.
Perhaps James is typical of the next generation of crofters, and it would be nice to think the achievements of the Assynt Crofters Trust has secured a good future for people like him. But right now, I'm quite literally in the saddle. heading north to Inchnadamf on one of the very few road sections of my journey through this spectacular landscape. And I'm about to have my education enhanced.
I must admit, I've never been that hot on geology. But when you travel through an area like this, with all those features around you that have been given the northwest of Scotland geopark status, then you can't help but wonder just how it all began.
Where you were on top of Suilven, you would actually see a landscape really formed of raw, hard bedrock. In fact, we've got rocks here that date back to 2,900 million years old. And the rocks are so hard that they have dominated completely the way in which the shape of the land developed.
The weather had driven me indoors, but that didn't matter. I met up with geologist Donald Fisher. Now, geologists tend to rabbit on about massive timescales like 2,900 billion years, but I can't get my head around those concepts. I wondered if Donald did.
I'll let you into a secret. I personally don't. No, it's impossible. We geologists convince ourselves that we really do have a feel for 500,000 years, or more likely 1,000,000 years, or 500 million years. I have a theory that no geologist really understands what 1,000,000 years is like.
So what is it that makes this area so different from anywhere else?
Well, we really have to go back to the geological past, Cameron. There is a structure which we find runs all the way down through Sutherland, and it's a famous thing called the Moyne Thrust. It simply means a structure where rocks were dislocated by shearing, by compressional forces within the Earth's crust. And older rocks from far away, that is to the southeast near Inverness, were thrust or pushed horizontally towards, up and over the rocks in Sutherland.
So we sort of talking about plates.
Yes, when plates collide, there is huge compression. So for example, if I want to compress my two elbows and get them closer, I can either go like that, or I can shear one arm over the other, and my elbows are now closer. And that's what happens. We now understand that, but of course, at the time it was discovered by two very famous geologists called Ben Peach and John Horn. They were the first people to actually discover it, shall we say. And in discovering it, they were very successful in resolving a huge debate, indeed a fierce argument that ran within the geological scientific community in the mid-1800s.
So I'm in geological terms, in for a bit of a treat.
Yeah.
Heading up towards Ben Loyal, and I'm sure, if we look at this map here, where are we just now? We're
here, Cameron.
Okay, so I'm going to be heading up right across to Ben Stack in Foinaven, and then across beyond Ben Hope, and eventually up to Ben Loyal.
You're going to take a walk over and along the zone of the Moyne Thrust structure itself. You're going to go over these mountain ridges, and from the tops of these you'll have the most fabulous view of a land surface 2,900 million years old.
Incredible. Well, there's one thing about these great geological time spans. My wife says I'm far too old to be doing a long walk like this. These time spans make me feel like a youngster.
But Sutherland geology isn't just about antiquity. There are other odd things here. At Inchnadamf, limestone rocks predominate, and their porous nature has resulted in an extensive cave network, something that's very unusual in Scotland. This network not only offers exploratory opportunities to sports cavers, but also hints as to what Scotland's past would have been like. For the last dozen years, members of the Grampian Speleological Group have been quite literally unearthing the secrets of our past.
This is the famous crag of the Bone Caves, Inchnadamf Bone Caves. And what it shows are remnant passages that were probably part of a much larger cave system that ran down the axis of the valley, draining water from both sides of the valley. Something like 70 or 80% of all the animal remains that we have to research in our museums in Scotland have actually come from this area, and most of them from these caves here.
We've just been talking about the bone caves. Okay. If we now start talking about the Clarnite, the big cave, Scotland's longest cave, which is behind and underneath the cliffs behind there.
So that's not really a tourist cave?
That's not a tourist cave, that's definitely a sporting cave. That was discovered in '66, and in '95 we finally made a breakthrough through some of the sumps. Cave divers got through into some really large passages. In those passages we discovered bones. Almost a complete skeleton of a brown bear. It's been identified as a brown bear, just lying in one of the passages. And we haven't a clue how it got there, because there's no easy way in. And we've no real idea how old it is either.
This is like a mass industrialisation. What are you doing here? These nice quiet hills you've come and you've done, I don't know what it is. What's going on?
We started digging down here 12.5 years ago. And at Christmas, just after Christmas last year, we broke through into the main cave system. And in fact, since then, we've discovered about 500 or 600 metres of passages just from this dig.
Okay, girls.
It's amazing that bit of food going in there.
The girls are on their bikes there. They're working very, very hard. I think we should maybe explain what they're doing.
Yes, well, this is a fantastic machine made by one of our members coming up from Sheffield, Norman Flux. This is Fluxcavator Mark V. So the three cycle frames are all powering the single large winch drum, and it's pulling buckets from roughly 100 feet below, 30 metres down, up to the surface, perhaps 40 kilograms at a time.
Okay, well, I suppose the moment comes when I should really think about going down there.
You know, I've spent about the past 35 years wandering over Scotland's mountain tops and enjoying that. I'm not too sure I want to spend any time wandering below the ground, but let's have a look, see what it's like. Shouldn't have had that extra sausage this morning. Makes you feel like a hobbit.
It's not everybody's cup of tea, to be fair. It can be claustrophobic and things, but once you've done it once or twice, you know the way on, and you're with the right sort of guys who'll help you through. That'll give you a bit of a buzz.
Wow. Well, to be perfectly honest, I've come down all these big long ladders. I'm down here in just a bit of a small chamber, but I think this is where I'll probably cop out, because the next bit involves crawling along in a very, very low tunnel, crawling along on your knees. And as a hill walker of sort of 35 years standing, my knees are pretty well shot, and I don't think they'll cope with that. So I think what I'm going to do is shoot back up. I'll leave this to the real experts. Now, Donald Fisher warned me that on no account should I leave Amsterdam before coming up here to pay respects to his two great geological heroes, Ben Peach and John Horne. And it says here they played the foremost part in the unravelling of the geological structure of the Northwest Highlands. So there we are, respects duly paid. I'm now off to this area across here, one of the wildest and roughest sections of the Northwest Highlands. You know, one of the real delights about coming to this corner of Sutherland is the network of stalkers' paths that crisscross the hills. Unlike hill walkers' paths that tend to, breeze right up the front of the mountain, getting to the summit in the quickest possible time, these old traditional paths were kind of made by the guys who lived on the land, who lived on the land all their life. They knew the intricacies of the landscape, all the folds and slopes. And they built paths that took devious lines across the hills. They sort of smoothed out the contours. They followed the lines of least resistance. And they're absolutely wonderful. And all the guys through the years who have actually maintained these paths too have done a fantastic job. And hill walkers like myself are nowadays really indebted to these guys. What I'd like to know is how these guys in bygone years cope with the midges. Oh. You may be wondering why I didn't just jump in a car and drive from Lochinver to Tongue. And it's a fantastic car journey, there's no doubt about that, probably one of the best in the country. But when you sit in a car, you're cocooned from the landscapes that you're passing through.
And it's really only by walking that you can tune into the land, you can connect with the land, just get used to its rhythms, get used to its subtleties. And you follow some of the tracks that our ancestors have followed for hundreds and hundreds of years, so you can sometimes hear those whispers and taints of those times gone by. And the lovely thing about walking in the land is you can stop whenever you want and just simply gaze at the beauty of it. Just stop and wonder at the majesty of it all. From here I took a detour because I felt I couldn't miss out on a visit to the bird reserve of Handa Island, somewhere I'd always been meaning to get to. And I also wanted to travel there under my own steam. But I'm not a canoeist, so I needed some help. Brian Wilson was the first man to kayak all the way around the coast of Scotland, and having achieved that, he then circumnavigated Ireland. But he's passionate about paddling in this area.
I think it's a combination of islands and mountains. I mean, the mountains are so close to the sea here, and the sea locks come right in past the mountains. So what you have is sea and mountains kind of meshed together, you know, like a kind of handshake. And add into that, you've got the groups of islands, you've got the Summer Isles, you've got the Hebrides not far offshore here. It really makes a pattern that's almost unique in Britain, really.
So we launch and head out for Handa Island.
Let's do that. Let's go have a look at Handa.
What's it going to be like out there, do you think? It's...
On the way out to Handa, I think it'll be dead easy.
Will the current wind in our favour?
Yeah, it will be.
Let's go for it.
Good.
I talk quite a lot about when walking and there's connecting with the land, getting the opportunity to connect with the landscape. Mm-hmm. Do you get that when you're kayaking? Do you connect with the water?
Not just with the water, but with the smells and the sounds and the sights of it. But you also tune into the tides and the weather, because that's what you're using to get from A to B. It becomes second nature to know whether the tide's rising or falling or going around a headland in a certain direction. And you take into account that, you know, compared to what the wind's doing. Right a little bit. You look at the landscape and the seascape and the way that the early Celtic travellers or Christian monks would have looked at it. An island isn't something that's inaccessible because it's got water all around it. It's accessible because it has the water to it and it has the tides flowing past it. And you can choose where you're going according to where the day's tide is taking you.
What are the most sort of difficult seas you've been in, Brian? I mean, how dangerous does it become?
A kayak can handle strong winds up till about force 8, at which time it starts to do things to the sea that you don't really want to be out in, and it'll also start to catch your paddle blades and make you feel pretty tippy. But a lot depends on what the tide's doing. A wind against the tide will cause serious conditions. So the roughest conditions I've been out in have been force 8 with an opposing tide, which makes a very, very hilly seascape, and it makes it quite hard to survive for long in.
Hey, brilliant. Thank you, Brian. Great, made it. Every summer, the Scottish Wildlife Trust sets up a temporary base here on Handa Island to monitor and protect the vast bird population. Nobody lives here now all year round, but till the 19th century, it was home to over 60 people. Looking after the island today is Ranger Amy Corton.
Apparently there was a queen of Handa, so it was the oldest widow.
Queen?
The oldest widow on the island was in charge of everything.
Do you ever regard yourself in that position?
We did try to form a parliament once. I had a volunteer who was the treasurer, and it was quite funny. We made up some little rules for ourselves.
Yeah.
If you came to visit Handa, you weren't allowed to take any chocolate away with you. You had to leave it here for the ranger.
Who was you?
Yeah.
So people lived here, married here, raised children here, died here, presumably were buried here as well.
Yeah, there's a graveyard on the island as well. It does actually have quite a few people from the mainland in it. They used to bring people over and bury them here because they were frightened the wolves would dig up the dead bodies and eat them.
But no wolves today?
No, no.
The only thing we have to look out for are bonxies. Tell me about the bonxies.
They're quite big birds. They'll chase other birds to make them regurgitate their fish, and then they'll eat the fish that the other birds had caught. But they'll also kill birds to eat them too, so they'll kill puffins. Sometimes they'll kill kittiwakes as well. They're quite...
Gosh, so they're real aggressors of the bird world.
Yeah, predators, yeah.
Predators, that's a nice word, isn't it? This year, one of Handa's summer residents is research student Becky Green, who's studying the 70-odd pairs of great skuas, or bonxes, that come here every summer. And she's got quite an unusual view of these birds.
There's birds that you love. I mean, it's hard not to love the bonxes when they've got their little chicks running around and you know, and they're lovely and territorial, they're sort of good parents, and you know, you want to see them do well.
So you see the nice side of them?
Yeah, I do, yeah, and the horrible side as well when they're trying to dive bomb you.
So how do you keep track of 70 pairs of birds?
We've got a GPS. At the beginning of the season, we do what's called an all-island census, and we walk up and down the island and find all the nests that we possibly can. So the majority of them, at least, are mapped. And then when I want to find them again, I will go out with the GPS. Spend a couple of days a week just sort of like wandering around their territories, sort of checking on their chicks or their eggs, taking measurements and things like that, sort of recording them. And then I spend a couple more days collecting what are known as pellets, which are the regurgitated remains of their diet, so we can analyse them and sort of find out what it is that they're eating most.
But the highlight of any trip to this island is the 400-foot tall Great Stack of Handa.
Yeah, Amy, I must confess, I feel quite overwhelmed being here, and I think it's the whole sensory thing. I can see probably more seabirds than I've ever seen before in one place. I can smell more seabirds than I've ever smelt before. And the sound of it all between the sea and the birds, it's incredible. I suppose for most people who come here, this is the sort of pièce de résistance of the island. This is what people come to see.
Yeah, this is the most spectacular part, definitely. Yeah.
So what are we seeing here? What are all the birds that we can see? I mean, I can see some, obviously the easy ones like the puffins.
Yeah, so the puffins are all on the top of the stack there.
Yeah.
They've got burrows. But we've also got a lot of guillemots and razorbills at the top. And then further down again, we've got kittiwakes and we've got some fulmars as well.
The kittiwakes, are they the ones who nest on the horizontal ledges?
Yeah, they do. The guillemots are the ones that really pack themselves in tight. So they all sit there facing the cliff with their backs outwards. And
Notice that. Why do they all look as though they're in the huff of something?
It's kind of like a defence against predators. So the skuas and the gulls will come and they'll try and steal their eggs to eat. So if they all pack in tightly, they put their eggs under their feet like penguins, then it's difficult for the birds to get in and steal the eggs from them.
So what's your favourite?
Fulmars, definitely. They always look like they're enjoying themselves. They're floating on the air at the top of the cliffs. If you sit still at the top, they'll come and look at you as well, and you can see them looking at you through their eye. Yeah. I think they're really nice, yeah.
Back on the mainland from Handa, I've gone up the coast to Kyle Skew.
Hi, out. True vine, huh? Aye. Good man. That was just safe, aye.
And this is another first for me. I've joined prawn fisherman Andy MacLeod as he set out on his daily trip heading out to sea. It's early August, still only 7 a.m, and what a morning I've chosen as we steam out past another of Sutherland's great mountains, Cognac.
I've been at the creel fishing for 7 years. I was trawling for that before that. I've always been fishing now.
What took you to the fishing in the first place?
I don't know. I don't know.
And we're out here on a lovely day in the middle of summer. It's beautiful to be here. But what's it like in a kind of dour November's day or a January day?
Pretty miserable. It's alright sometimes, you know, but it can be miserable, you know. Cold, wet, boat rolling about, hard going, you know.
And how dangerous is it?
I wouldn't say it's dangerous. Not really, no.
In relative terms?
Nah, I wouldn't say it's dangerous. Yeah. It can be dangerous, but just a bit of common sense.
As Andy pulls out the creels to see what they've caught, his mate Darren chops up the bait. The weather might be delightful, but the catch isn't.
That's not a great start to your day, is it?
No, I think there's room for improvement yet.
How many do you expect to find in there?
I could be getting a few, you know, half a dozen or a bit more maybe.
How many of these do you have? That looks better. That's a good haul, yeah. Yeah, oh wow, look at that.
There's a couple of, that's a large one.
The big ones, aren't they?
2 large ones. See the last two, there's a couple of large prawns in it. And
yeah.
It was good. That was just on the edge of the ground.
Aye.
And now this creel's probably on the, you know.
Okay.
See now there's no prawns at all now. And,
yeah. It's looking good now. How would you rate this haul, Andy? Is this a reasonable haul?
No, it's poor. The fishing is poor just now. It has been poor the last couple of weeks. And
Is that just a seasonal thing?
Yes, it is, but it seems to be getting, the poorer times seem to be getting longer.
I'd been promised a good feed of langoustine by mine host Stuart Lothian of the Kyleskew Hotel.
Wow. Here we are, Cameron.
Look at that.
Langoustine fresh from the loft this afternoon.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Now listen, before we eat these, I want to tell a little story. A number of years ago, when I was a young man, newly married, my wife and I went to Brittany, and we went to a seafood restaurant. And we had a thing called fruit de la mer, fruit of the sea. And it came in like a 3-tier cake stand, all the shellfish. And we looked at it and thought, how do we eat this? We had no idea. And it's given me a phobia about shellfish to this day. So could you maybe show me how you actually tackle this? I'm not sure whether you actually eat it or fight it.
No, it's fairly straightforward. You might need a bath afterwards, but just twist the tail off. It's the tail section you're going to eat. This is the section we're going to eat.
Okay.
Gently crack the shell down the back, peel off the top, squeeze the tail, and it should just...
Wonderful.
Boy.
Wonderful.
There we go.
Thank you
On
very
you
much.
go.
Okay, well I'm not even going to have a dip in this because this is so fresh.
Enjoy.
I think I saw this particular one come out of the water. Look at that, doesn't it look beautiful? You know, it's just so full of flavour. And I've eaten so many prawns in my time that I've been simply tasteless. But this is, full of flavour. And all washed down with a nice glass of white. Yeah, this is a life. Enough eating, enough drinking. It's time to get back to the walk. But first, there's a man-made structure to say goodbye to. What do you think of the bridge? The Kyleskew Bridge. Some people see it as a real blot in the landscape, a sort of modern contrivance in such a natural setting, but I have to confess I quite like it. I like the simple lines of it. I rather like how it blends into the landscape. And I think on a more pragmatic note, I'm old enough to remember having to queue up at Kyleskew for hours on end to get the little ferry across to Kylestrom. I remember that lines of cars on a single track road. So I think it's a bit of a blessing. And the alternative is a 4-hour round trip if you just want to get to the other side. A round trip right round through Lairg and round the top of the country and back. I don't think that bears thinking about. It's a wonderful spot here just at the junction of Loch Glencool and Loch Glendhu. And these waters hold a dark secret. During the war, the 12th Submarine Flotilla trained here, and they were training young submariners to basically sit astride torpedoes, and they would go down below enemy convoys and attach the warheads to the hull of the enemy craft. They would then swim away and detonate these warheads. And the amazing thing was the whole community here knew that this was happening, that this training was going on, but nobody gave the game away, nobody told the secrets. And it's been said here that this was a community that knew much, but talked very little. On any long distance walk, you begin to anticipate the high passes, or the bealachs, as we call them here in Scotland. That's those areas of high ground that separate one region of landscape with another, or quite often one region of cultural identity with another. And on this occasion, I'm saying goodbye to the hills and the landscapes of the western seaboard, where the great sea lochs intrude into the land. And I'm heading over into an area north of the road that runs between Laxford Bridge and Lairg, an area of landlocked mountains and very, very different mountains. Something I've noticed over the past 3 or 4 days is the complete absence of sheep from these hills. A few years ago, sheep would have been everywhere. They'd have been grazing at every corner, almost eating everything in sight. But the truth of the matter is that many of these estates now are given over almost exclusively to sporting purposes, to fly fishing or to deer stalking. And people pay a lot of money to come and take part in these activities. But I don't think there's any doubt about the fact that sheep farming is still vital to the Sutherland economy. And despite the hard times and low prices of recent years, the sheep market at Lairg is one of the largest in Europe. But it's also the moment of reckoning for the year's income.
Just a wee bit anxious as to what might happen later on in the day, because there's the whole year's work, you know, and it's all boiling down to today. So you get into the ring and you just have to see what they say and what they think of your land.
Jan Mackenzie works on her own croft, and she's also the shepherd for the North Loch Never estate. The Lairg sheep sale is the culmination of a year's hard graft.
These are the tups, these are stock tups. They're what I'll be using this year. It's a selection of tups actually. It's the ones from a croft in Langdale. They're here, and the ones from North Loch Never farm where I work. But you need to give them a bite to feed before they go out tup time.
So what makes a good tup? It's power to reproduce.
Yes, well, certainly if it's got the reputation to reproduce, yes. They've got to have good conformation, good bone about them. See that fella there? He's got good heavy bone. Nice hair, they've got clean. See, he's nice and clean, no black spots.
In your lifetime here, have you seen a great reduction in the number of people shepherding in the hills in Sutherland?
Oh yes, definitely, yes. I mean, there used to be maybe 4 or 5 shepherds on each estate, and now there'll be 1, if any at all.
So how important are sheep to this particular landscape?
I would say they're very important. I mean, there's a lot of sheep going off here anyway, and if you lose the sheep out of the grounds, it's going to change the whole environment. Because when your ground, it's going to get rank and it's going to grow long and it's not been grazed hard enough. It's changing everything if sheep are not here. So we do need them.
We tend to think of these lands as wilderness areas or empty lands. But you know, for hundreds and hundreds of years, people have been living off the land. And these are the first peat cuttings I've seen since leaving Lochinver. And you know, with the whole uncertainty of rising fuel prices worldwide, I just wonder if we could eventually see the creation of a whole new peat cutting industry in places like Sutherland. I've just come down from the high ground that runs across from Kylstrom to Achfarry. And I have to say, after all the chat with geologists, with cavers, with crofters, I've kind of relished this time on my own, just enjoying the solitude. So it's quite appropriate to come to this old bothy here, which goes by the name of Lone. So I think that's quite suitable. And behind me stands a triumvirate of Corbetts. Those are the Scottish mountains between 2,500 feet and 2,999 feet. They're the wee brothers of the bigger Munros, if you like. And behind me is Arkle. Over to my left here, Maulhorn. And in the distance, you can't actually see it from here, is Foinaven, the biggest of them all. And I'm just about to make my way up to a high camp, just a nice cusp between the 3 hills. And all going well, tomorrow morning, I'll get onto the summit of Foinaven, a mountain I've always regarded as the Queen of Sutherland. I love this big split boulder here. They're like twin portals, the gateway to Foinaven. You know, I'm almost at a loss for words at just the incredible landscape up here. Wandering up here this morning, the cloud was down, and as I've climbed up here, it's gradually lifted, revealing this one of the most incredible landscapes that you'll find in Scotland. Indeed, one of the most incredible landscapes you'll find anywhere in Britain.
It really is just stunning. And I stand here and I look right back to Suilven, where I started this walk. And I look right down there over this sort of fold over fold of the hills, the ridge line against ridge line. And all the way up, it is absolutely stunning. And you know, people talk about your Ben Nevises and your Trossachs and Cairngorms, our national parks, Torridons, the Isle of Skye. This landscape up to the northwest of Scotland compares with anything in the country. It really is absolutely fantastic. What I'm looking for is a nice flat bit of ground to lie on. Reasonably sheltered, but with enough breeze to keep the midges down and some water fairly close by. And I think I see my point just down here. Yeah, I think this will do about here. Perfect. You know, people sometimes think you have to rough and tough it to wild camp in a place like this, but it's kind of ironic that the technology that we all try and escape from coming to these places is the very technology that helps to make it comfortable for us when we come here. And this whole pack of mine, including the tent and a sleeping bag and stove and food, probably weighs no more than 12 to 15 pounds. And that's about 6 or 7 kilograms. And and I've got everything I need in here. Waterproof jacket that probably weighs about 400 grams. Waterproof trousers that are maybe 200 grams. All my food for nights camping. And my sleeping bag probably weighs about 900 grams. It's pure duck down. And you'll see I've got it extra wrapped up in a polythene bag here because this is the one item of equipment that you don't want to get wet. You want to keep this nice and dry. And it really is beautiful, soft duck down, and that will all kind of inflate up there and be very nice and cosy. And I always kind of maintain that any fool can be uncomfortable when you come out into the hills. So it helps to bring one or two nice little things just to kind of remind you of home, just to make things that little bit more comfortable, like a little bottle of wine to go with the freeze-dried food. I've always been very intrigued by the name of this mountain. Foinaven comes from the Gaelic Foinaven, and I've always understood that to mean the fair mountain or the white mountain. Now, you can understand that translation when you look at this mountain. You see these lovely silvery white quartzite screes that give the impression that the hill is covered in snow almost at any time of the year. But more recent thinking suggests that word Fríorn is spelt slightly differently, and it actually means the mountain of warts, which I don't think is quite as pleasant as the fair mountain. But you can understand that interpretation as well, because the hill has 5 separate summits, and I suppose from a distance they could look like warts on the flanks of the mountain. From this point, the character of the mountain changes quite dramatically. Up until now we've been walking up broad, fairly featureless grassy ridges. But from here the mountain tightens up into a narrow, airy, very dramatic ridge with steep slopes falling away on either side. But I think the greatest feature of this mountain that you'll notice here is the very fact that it's eroding below your feet. It's really a peeling carcass of a mountain. It's kind of falling apart. And that has led to very, very unstable underfoot conditions. So you have to be very, very careful when treading this particular tight ridge. For more years than I can care to remember, mountaineers have debated the height of Foinaven. And the reason for that debate is about 20 years ago, the Ordnance Survey did a survey of all the mountains, and they gave this one the height of 914 metres. Now that could be anything between 2,999 feet or 3,002 feet. So it might have been a Munro, it might have been over the 3,000 foot contour, or it might not have been. Because of this debate, and it went on for a long, long time, the Monroe Society decided they were going to solve this problem once and for all. So they brought a team of surveyors up here, and using the latest GPS equipment, they re-measured the mountain, and they found, in fact, it was 12 feet short of Monroe status. The final figure that they reckoned on was 2,988 feet. Not only did they discover that, in fact, the mountain is less than Monroe height, but they also produced a wee sting in the tail. They realised that this summit here, that everybody thought was the summit, in fact wasn't. There was a wee contour ring missing from the Ordnance Survey 1 to 50,000 series map. And in actual fact, that cairn across there is the real summit. So I'm afraid I'm not finished yet. Well, we made it at last, and there was a point where I thought I was never going to get here. But does it really matter if Foinaven is a Monroe or not? I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters a jot, to be honest. But the point is, Foinaven is one of the most underrated mountains in the country. It's certainly within my top 10 favourite mountains. It really is a fantastic hill. And I would recommend every hill walker in the country to get themselves up here, to get this on the list of mountains to climb, and you certainly won't regret it. And just before I head down the mountain, let me leave you with one thought. Monroe bagging, and indeed Corbett bagging, are amongst the most delectable of addictions. And I commend both of them to you with a passion. I just wandered through the hills from Foinaven and Loch Stack. And in the course of a few miles, I've come into a completely different landscape, both scenically and culturally. This is Dún Dornagal, or the Fort of Dornagal. There's about 500 of these brochs scattered throughout the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. Nobody seems terribly sure what the purpose was, but it's generally believed that they were circular defensive buildings. But if that is the case, who was the enemy? Now, the finger of history points towards the Vikings. But there's some difficulty here because these were built during the Iron Age. And at that time, there was no organised civilization in Norway. But more recently, scientists have discovered rock carvings that are dated at 1,000 years BC. And these are carvings of Norsemen in the longboats. So that would maybe suggest that there were groups of unorganised, undisciplined Norsemen coming down from Norway to these southern lands of what we call Sutherland.
On my walk through Sutherland, I've discovered a wilderness of extraordinary beauty. But these glens weren't always empty. Until the 19th century, there were around 50 townships in Strathnaver alone, and the events in this glen achieved notoriety when the Gaelic-speaking population was thrown out to make way for commercial sheep farming. Betty Hill head teacher Jim Johnston has spent years studying the clearances here.
We're just stepping into the remnants of one of the houses here, but if we were here at the time of the clearances or prior to the clearances, this would be a substantial house. Most of the space would be taken up by cattle. For that reason, these houses were often built on a slope with cattle down at the low end, so that the effluent that they produced during the winter would flow away from you rather than up into your kitchen area or whatever. It was a time when opportunity was available for anyone who had a kind of entrepreneurial spirit. And the Countess of Sutherland had that entrepreneurial spirit, as did Patrick Seller, her factor. They had it in abundance.
In the course of history, Patrick Seller's It hasn't done too well. He's got as a real villain, hasn't he?
He certainly has. He's come across as the villain, and that continues. It would be a very dangerous thing to do, to go into the bar in Betty Hill and praise Patrick Seller. He had absolutely no compunction about evicting people from ground that he possessed or anything like that. He knew what he wanted, and he was prepared to pursue that with little regard for other people. He was one of the largest farmers in the whole of Scotland, and in that area of his one farm, there had been 2,000 people living prior to the clearances, and those 2,000 people were replaced by 18 shepherds from the borders. But from the point of view of Victorian society, he was a big success, and he was an expert farmer. But then Mussolini made the trains run in Italy at one time. History repeats itself. And I think one of the most telling things about all this is that things like this are still going on. You still have parts of the world where traditional lifestyles are being disrupted and destroyed.
Many of the relatives of those who were cleared found themselves living on the Sutherland coast, and just before my final mountain, I wanted to meet one of them. Angela Mackay not only lives on the coastline, but earns a living from the coastline, farming oysters. But she came to that job almost by accident.
I was a hairdresser, and I just sold my business, and I was a wee bit, wasn't very sure what I was going to do next.
So, I mean, from giving people blue rinses and perms and all the rest of it,
I'm giving haircuts to oysters now.
That's quite a difference.
Yes, but they don't talk back.
Could you sort of run me through the process of farming an oyster?
They come in about the size of my little fingernail there, and we put them into these bags. As they get bigger, we take them a little bit further in, and we take the bigger ones out, put them into bigger bags, and the process goes on like that until they become fully grown. And then we take them out of the water, further up the shore a bit to harden the shells, so that when they're out of the water for a while, the muscle starts getting stronger. They're just really like pets to you, I suppose. And
are they really?
Yes.
You don't give them names, do you?
No. Too many.
Well, can we go and maybe choose some for my tea
Yes,
tonight?
no problem.
Lovely, thank you.
I think we'll take some of these ones.
Okay. Oh, let's have a look.
Feel that one. They're nice and full. Never ever have an oyster if it's open like that in any way at all. In fact, what you can do is always tap them, and you make sure, and you know hollow sound.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll see if we get one or two more in it.
Brilliant. Oh, oh, oh.
You'll all want a wee taste there, yeah?
Marvellous. Kyle of Tongue oysters. The best in the world.
But of course.
This is Grant, and Grant last year was Scotland's Young Chef of the Year. So for getting advice on how to eat oysters, I'm in very capable hands here. I think the best thing to do is for you to demonstrate to me.
Yeah, no problem
You
at all.
have a go and then tell me what to do.
What we basically do once we've opened them is we just simply serve them a bit of lemon on a bed of ice, and basically we just want to make sure it's nice and loose in the shell. Down the hatch.
Go on.
Beautiful.
Okay, just make sure it's fairly loose in there. Okay, and then here we go. You almost missed part of it. Yeah. Yes, it is very.
You get
the combination of the lemon seems to, well, the lemon seems to bring out the taste of the seafood.
Yeah, it does. It's really
fantastic.
Good. Simply done. Don't mess about with it too much. Let's get it out simply and let the customer do the work. That's what I like to see. People using their hands.
Okay, now I'm going to try and chew this one, just to see what the difference is. Okay. Oh, that's good too. It's always a bittersweet moment when you come close to the end of a great journey like this one. And in this case, I'm a little sad because I know that very shortly I'm going to be finishing what has been a fantastic walk across the county of Sutherland. But at the same time, I'm actually quite pleased because I'm going to finish this journey on the top of an absolutely amazing mountain called Ben Loyal. Now, I know I've already said that Foinaven is the Queen of Sutherland, but according to a statistical account of 1840, Ben Loyal is in fact the Queen of the Highlands. This will be the second time I've completed this walk between Lochinver and Tongue. The first time was with my wife over 6 or 7 days during the summer. But for this journey, I was very keen to break it down into several parts, into the seasons of spring, summer and autumn. And I was quite keen to try and fine-tune the end of the walk this time with the fading out of the season, so that I could sit up here in these slopes of burnished bronze and listen to this incredible sound of the roaring of the red deer stags. What happens at this time of the year is each of the stags will gather its own herd of hinds, its own harem if you like, and other marauding stags will come along and try and take over the herd. And quite often the two stags will stand on the hillside and roar defiantly at each other. And quite often the stags will actually come together in head-to-head combat, their antlers interlocking as they fight. It's one of the great sights of the Highlands. But for me to sit up here at this time of the year and just listen to the roaring is something that I don't think I'll ever get tired of. One thing I've realised on this particular walk is that the geological complexities aren't confined to one area, but actually follow you all the way north to this most northern of mountains, Ben Loyal. And this hill is the only igneous mountain in the north, and it's made up of quite a peculiar form of granite called syenite. And that's a granite that doesn't have any quartz in it, or very, very little quartz in it. And it's because of the granite that this mountain has got its shape. It's weathered down into 4 distinct summits, or 4 distinct granite tors, the highest of which, Ancastale, I'm heading for right now. I think of one thing that really stands out in my mind of this walk is, well, other than the 3 mountains I've climbed, Suilven, Foinaven and Ben Loyal, of course, but I think the thing I'll always remember are the people. Both those who have been born and bred here and those who have come to Sutherland to make it their home. Those who earn their living by traditional means, by crofting, by fishing, by farming, and those who have come to service the needs of the tourists and the climbers, the mountaineers, the sea kayakers, the flying fishermen, the cavers, all of these people. Well, that's it. That's the end of the climb. And it's also a very breezy end to my walk through Sutherland. And I hope you'll agree with me that we should never really refer to Sutherland as the empty lands. I think this is a land overflowing with promise and potential. And for me, it'll always be a very, very special place.